Hello beautiful people and welcome to another video. I found this gem on Facebook Marketplace and as you can see this is a failed upcycling project. There's some serious burn marks on the top and I was almost 100% decided at this point that I would have to replace the entire veneer on the top. That's how bad it was. But even if that was the case, for this piece I really wanted to do a sympathetic restoration and preserve as much as possible of the original color and finish. I've seen some bad veneer, but I really had little hope for this one. There were some chunks of veneer missing, holes and really nasty stains. Fortunately, the hardware was still in the drawer. As I was looking at the piece, I was a bit confused. It looked like some of the pieces made by this company, F.H. Marshalls, which is a Scottish company known for making Art Deco pieces, but the doors, for example, are made of MDF, which was not introduced to Europe until the 70s. So I think this might be a reproduction made to look Art Deco with a base that's probably not original as well. This is an interesting design because this bit is screwed into this bit with these screws, and it's the same thing on the other side and also over here. I took off the hinge and there was a bit of oak surrounding an MDF panel. I think Rufus was confused about this piece as well. I know you could just give me a hand instead of looking. Grab a screwdriver and do some work. Nah, I think he just comes for snacks. I know I just said I wanted to preserve as much of the finish as possible, and I will, but because I'm going to strip the top and the sides completely, I also want the front to match, so I'm just gonna sand it. And because this was solid wood, mostly oak and a little bit of mahogany, it was actually pretty nice for a change.
A few moments later.
And then I found this inside, which was pretty interesting. I've never actually seen one of those. I've lived in the UK for 8 years now, and this is someone's social security card. So I hope they were okay and didn't need it and were able to actually get their benefits. But yeah, it was signed in 1946, which again is confusing because this is made of MDF partially. So if any of you actually knows anything about this particular piece, please do comment below because I'm curious. There were lots of small pieces of veneer that needed regluing or replacing, but as I mentioned before, I wanted to preserve as much of the original sideboard as possible, so I fixed all of them. What do you think about this base? Do you think this is original or is it an afterthought and someone replaced it? Because it's actually made of mahogany and the rest of this sideboard is made of oak, at least the frame. As it's often the case when you're working with old veneer that's not in a great condition, it's much safer to use a scraper rather than sand it, because it's super easy to burn through the veneer and then it's very difficult to replace it and make it look decent, so I did a little scraping.
2,000 years later.
And of course I did some sanding as well. And the more I scraped, the more damaged areas I found, so I had to replace those missing pieces of veneer, and this is how I did it. And this particular one was a bit more tricky because it's on the curve, so I just took my time and it worked. When I make repairs like this, I often use regular wood glue and a little bit of sawdust to help me blend those repairs in with the rest of the veneer and make them look less obvious. When you make repairs like this, it's almost impossible to make it perfect, just because every piece of wood is different and you're not going to find the exact same piece of veneer that will match the grain pattern exactly. So I often keep scraps from projects that I work on because you never know what you might need in the future. And in this case, it was a close match, but not exactly the same. Fortunately, there are many things that can be done to make those repairs look a bit better. You can use stains, touch-up markers, toners, and all sorts of other things to help you blend those in. But again, it takes some experience and it's not very easy. What is easy is using the sander on curved surfaces like this. And I'm not getting paid to say this, I just enjoy this product, so I'll put a link in the description if you want to buy one of these. They're actually not expensive, so check it out. Before tackling the top, I did a little more scraping to get me in the mood, and here it is. It just looks so bad, and I really wanted to save it, but like I said, I had very little hope. And to prove it, I put 80 grit sandpaper on it just to take the varnish off. That's how little hope I had. And after sanding it, you can really see those burn marks. They're very deep and there's just not an easy way to repair them. So this is what I came up with. I basically engraved a circle around each burn mark, quite deep so I could scoop out the middle bit, and I cut matching circles from a veneer that kind of matched the grain pattern, and I was going to glue them in and try to blend them in with the rest of the veneer. That was the plan. So it looks kind of okay. I mean, I don't know what else I could have done to make it look better. This was actually the worst one and the biggest one. I set the depth on my router to the thickness of those cutouts that I just made, and I removed that much from the circles that I just burnt into the top, if it makes sense. I freehanded it, but because of the engraved circle, it was actually pretty easy. So obviously you can still see it, it's not stained, bleached or anything, and it's not gonna be perfect, but like I said, I don't know what else I could have done to make it look better, and I'm okay with that. I used oxalic acid and tried to bleach those circles because the veneer was darker naturally, so it wasn't an exact match. And there were some other repairs I had to make, and this particular one had a piece of substrate missing, so I had to replace that before I could actually deal with the missing veneer. This is probably a good moment to say a huge thank you to all of you wonderful and generous people for supporting my channel and helping to keep the lights on at the shop, as well as buying snacks for all the neighborhood cats. I really appreciate it, and it makes a huge difference. If you guys want to support me, all the links are in the description. You can do it via Buy Me a Coffee, by hitting the super thanks button, visiting my Amazon wishlist link, or buying some merch that you can see under the video. I actually have a really cool new graphic with the shop cats, so check it out. And as always, huge thank you to all the channel members, you guys are the best. I did many more repairs like this, but I'm not going to show you all of them just because it's repetitive and boring, but you get the idea. I also used touch-up markers from Mohawk to help me cover those spots that you can see right here. This is pretty much old wood filler. At this point, I'm mostly done with sanding, but as you can see, the veneer isn't looking great. So my next step is to use oxalic acid, and this helps to remove some of the stains, organic stains, and it will bleach the veneer a little bit and hopefully make it more uniform and ready for the next step. I let the oxalic acid dry and I apply the second coat. And normally, if whatever you're trying to remove is not gone by the second coat, it's pretty much pointless to apply more because it's probably not going to help. I moved on to the drawers and I pretty much repeated the whole process. And when the second coat of the oxalic acid dried, this is what it looked like. So you can see why I wanted to replace it. I was feeling brave, so I used my sander on the doors, even though there was MDF underneath, and I managed not to sand through the veneer. However, I did all the edges by hand, and there was actually a little bit of oak, solid oak, around the door, so that made it a bit easier. And I used my new sander on the curved surfaces, which made it super easy. When I was done sanding, I used oxalic acid on the doors as well. I let it dry and I rinsed it off with water. I left it all to dry, and when I came in the next morning, this is what it looked like. I still need to do a little bit of sanding on the top of the sideboard because I was trying to spot treat some of the repairs, but this is pretty much as good as it gets. Remember when I said at the beginning that I wanted to preserve as much of the original color as possible? This is what I'm trying to do right here. So I didn't want to sand the inside. It was badly scratched and there were some discolored areas, but I thought I could fix it. So I gave it a clean and I used Restore a Finish on the entire inside of this sideboard. It worked quite well. However, there were some areas that needed more attention because the color difference was significant. So I used a little bit of toner. And I tried to do the same with the inside of the doors. And I'm not gonna lie, the condition was pretty rough, so I used furniture repair wax to fill in all those little gaps where veneer was missing, just around the edges, because otherwise I would have had to replace the whole thing. You can't just replace all those little pieces with new pieces of veneer. It's not practical. I also want to do this so you guys can see that it's not just sanding that fixes everything, because you might want to do a sympathetic restoration and preserve the original color and finish as much as possible, even if it's quite rough. So that's what I'm doing here. To make this a bit easier for myself, I removed the bottom of the drawer and I used 80 grit sandpaper just to kind of rough it up and make it easier for me to remove some of the felt before I did anything else. As far as the inside of the drawer, I used some white spirit and steel wool to clean it up. There were some ink stains and just old stuff. So it actually cleaned up pretty nicely, and then I used Restore Finish on the inside as well, and I was pretty happy with the way it looked. When I was done with that, I wanted to do something about the drawer bottom that didn't have any finish on it now because I removed the fabric. So I applied a little bit of this tinted oil and it matched the color of the rest of the drawers pretty well. I put it all together and it was looking good. For the other two drawers, I used white spirit to clean them inside and I applied Restore Finish as well, and they looked pretty nice. I removed those old rusty sliders and I replaced them later on. I sanded the entire bottom, I cleaned it up, and I applied Restore Finish as well. The back was looking pretty rough and it was really dirty, so I used some steel wool and white spirit to give it a good scrub. I also use my multi-tool and a little wire brush to polish all those screws because I was not going to remove them. And again, to repair all those tiny pieces of veneer missing around the edge of the back, I used furniture repair wax, and that did the trick. And using Restore a Finish on the back made it look shiny and much better. If you want to use Restore a Finish at home, you let it dry and you use something like beeswax on top of it, and you buff it out after a while for a nice shine. I gave the veneer one more sanding with 180 grit and I applied walnut stain. I decided to go with walnut because this is likely what the color of this sideboard was when it was new, and also because it's a great color and it matches kind of the inside of it. This stain will also help me hide all the imperfections in this old veneer, and not sure you can see them, but there's some repairs that I still need to do in the top, but I wanted to wait to see what color of the stain would actually look like when it was dry, and I will go back with the furniture wax and address those little holes and imperfections before I apply the top coat. There were many small dings and dents in the veneer, so I use my steamer to help me expand the wood grain and lift those up. When the veneer dried, I gave it a light sanding and I used my dental tool to remove any remaining bits of paint. When I was done staining, I found the best matching furniture repair wax and I fixed all those little holes in the top of the sideboard. As you can see, the repairs that I made are still visible and they will be visible, but I'm not done yet. It turned out that the furniture hardware that I decided to reuse was made of some cheap alloy, so I needed to give it some color. But first I gave it a good clean and I used a little bit of paint thinner just to make sure I dissolved all the crap that was stuck to it. And even though this looks like it might be copper, at least the hinges, it's not. It's just steel that's plated and yeah, it just doesn't look good, so I need to do something with it. Now that I can actually see the final color or almost final color of this sideboard, I can do some touching up with the touch-up markers. And for the top coat, I decided to try something new. So I'm using this Osmo oil that's tinted and it kind of looks like chocolate, but also like something else. I can't really decide, but it looked really cool when I finished applying it. I don't know if it comes across on video, but this was not shiny when it dried. It looked very matte and it actually looked like chocolate. And because of the tint in this oil, it blends everything in even more and helps me hide the imperfections. And though you can still see the repairs I made, it makes no difference to me. I try to preserve it as much as possible. I would have replaced the entire veneer if I wanted to make it new, so I'm very happy with the way it looks. What do you guys think? And depending on the angle, those repairs are actually not very noticeable, and at least they are the same color as the rest of the veneer. So yeah, I'm happy with my choice. I use some rub and buff on the hardware, and for a change, this is actually very muted color, and I think it goes very well with the rest of it. It's just not in your face, and I really like it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have, as always, hit the like, comment, subscribe, and if you're feeling generous, you can buy me a coffee or hit the super thanks button. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.